we're in 2 Kings 15 this week, and we're going to be in that we got it. I took a few of the slides out because we keep looking at them every week, and they're just kind of they get kind of boring after a while. Now, this map, that's the same map that we had before. All right. But now I've got a little bit different map, okay? And this one shows the other countries and kingdoms that are around Israel. You know, we keep talking about Aram, king of Aram, who's up at Damascus here, and Amman, which if you know, that's Amman, Jordan. So that's the area of Jordan today, and this, of course, Moab is still Jordan, and get down into here. That's today. That's southern part of Israel as well as Egypt. So, but I got that map for you, and then I changed the timeline things. I found a better timeline that's easier to read, and it's actually as I was looking at it today, I think it's more accurate for the dates and so forth. I was looking through that, and that other one, I kept having to say, well, everybody's got a different date. Well, everybody still has a different date, but this one more closely coincides with what I think the dates actually were. And so where we are tonight, we're going to be over here, right here in Uzziah. Okay, this part right here where he starts in 790 BCE, and then he goes for 52 years after that. And we're looking at here, and we have the prophets that were active during that time were Amos and Jonah and Hosea, right there. And then you'll actually see right toward the end of Uzziah that that's where Isaiah kicks in. And so all right, so let's any comments or questions on that? Hopefully this will be easier to read because it's got a lot more information in it. You can look up here, and it's got like the Assyrian kings, and right, we're going to be talking about this guy here, Tiglath-Pileser, and however you say that, however you say his name, but and then you got the kings of Aram here, and so forth. So it kind of gives you an idea of some of the things that are happening in the rest of the world, along with Israel. So going on then, in 2 Kings 15, 1 through 7. In the 27th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Azariah, son of Amaziah, king of Judah, became king. He was 16 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jecholiah of Jerusalem. And now he did what was right in Adonai's eyes, just like all of his father Amaziah had done. He did not, or now he did what was right in Adonai's eyes. However, in the high places, those were not taken away. The people were still sacrificing and burning incense on the high places. And Adonai struck the king. Now, right now, this is the Cliff's Note version that is in 2 Kings 15. We're going to also go back over to 2 Chronicles 26, and that there you have the full, that whole chapter is nothing but Azariah, and although they call him Uzziah instead of Azariah. Kings calls him Azariah, Chronicles calls him Uzziah. So verse 5, then Adonai struck the king so that he had Sarat, the leprosy, until the day of his death, and he lived in an isolated house. Meanwhile, Jotham, the king's son, or Jotham, the king's son was in charge of the palace and governing the people of the land. Now the rest of the acts of Azariah, all he did, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Judah? Then Azariah slept with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the city of David. Then his son Jotham became king in his place. All right. Now, that, like I said, that was the short version. All right. And it pretty well kind of gives you the, what all was, the high points of Uzziah. And like I said, Uzziah, Amaziah, same guy. And he became king. If you'll remember, his father Amaziah, who was also a good king, but right toward the end he kind of messed up. Well, he was assassinated at Lachish, and so we have no record of of Amaziah, or I mean, of Uzziah here, taking revenge on his on the death of his father. Like other ones we talked about last week, where they had taken revenge and killed everybody, and his own father had not taken so much revenge on the ones that killed his father, and so now we see Uzziah. There's no record at all of him, in any kind of retribution against the assassins of his own father. And so he started out his reign doing what was right before the Lord. And then there's one thing though that I keep looking at, and I'm seeing these guys, and I've tried to really come up with find a real good answer as to what the deal was about the high places, and having destroying those high places. There were only a couple of kings that went through that and said, okay, we're going to take out all of those high places, taking down all the Asherah poles, and get rid of all of those things. And someone who was like Uzziah, who became very, very, very popular, he could have done that, and he had the political capital to do that, and yet he didn't do it. His father didn't do it, and even though they didn't sacrifice there, and they although his father did toward the end of his life, but they, even if they just let him alone and did nothing, God had said, I want those things gone, and they didn't do it. So it was, the only thing that I can think of is that it was so widespread, the practice of making sacrifices in these high places was so widespread that they just didn't want to take that on. That was something that would have made the people angry, or just caused trouble, and it would be like, well, I'm trying to come up with an example here today. It would be like somebody coming in and saying, no, you know what, if you're at a certain age in your life, and you got enough money, we're going to take Social Security away from you, and so that even though you paid in on it all your life, we're going to give it to these poor people that are coming across the border, or something like that. And that's wait a minute, I think that's what they are doing. But anyway, it would be equivalent to something like that. And so they just didn't do it. And that was kind of a black mark against all of the kings of Judah, except for a couple, and then certainly all the kings of Israel. Not only did they not take down the high places, they were up there with the people sacrificing and burning incense on them. So that's again a black mark against these different ones. Now, so we see here that, and we'll talk about more about Uzziah later on. That he became proud and arrogant, and he died a leper. We'll get right into that, and later on toward the end of the lesson, I'll talk about how that happened. So just going to hit some high spots here in the rest of chapter 15 of 2 Kings, and that in the 38th year of the king Azariah of Judah, Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, reigned over Israel in Samaria for 6 months. Now this Zechariah was not Zechariah the prophet, or Zechariah, the one that wrote the book of Zechariah. No, this was a different name, or different king. I mean, a different person with that same name. So he didn't last long in the whole scheme of things. He lasted 6 months, and then we go down to verse 13, and Shallum, son of Jabesh, began to reign in the 39th year of King Uzziah of Judah, and he reigned for 1 month in Samaria. Okay, so that was very short-lived, that he reigned as the king. And again, these guys, they would come in and they would try in Israel. Israel was a mess. It was a basket case, because there was so much palace intrigue, and this one after that one, and kill off this one, and then the next one guy would come into power and they'd kill off the different ones. And so they went through like 5 kings, I think, in the time that Uzziah was king of Judah. Judah had much more stability than did Israel. Much more political stability. Okay, and so that was what was going on in Israel at that time. Now, going ahead, in the 39th year of King Azariah of Judah, Menahem, son of Gadi, became king over Israel, and he reigned 10 years in Samaria. But he did what was evil in Adonai's eyes. Surprise, surprise, surprise. He was from Israel, and all of them did that. And throughout his days, he never turned away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and that meaning the sins of idolatry, and which he caused Israel to commit. Then King Pul of Assyria invaded the country, so Menachem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, so that his hand might be with him to strengthen his hold on the kingdom. And Menachem exacted the money from Israel from every person of means. They're soaking the rich. Each one 50 shekels of silver to give to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria turned back, and he stayed no longer in the land, it says. So here's a guy that the king of Assyria. Now this the king that we're talking about here is Tiglath-Pileser, and I'll tell you right now, I don't know how that's pronounced. You get probably 2 or 3 different people to say how it's pronounced, but that was 2,500 years ago or more, 3,000 years ago. So I'm not really too worried about it. But that's what Menachem did. He paid King Pul, which is Pul and Tiglath-Pileser the third, same guy. Okay, and so he paid him 1,000 talents of silver to just, okay, look, we'll do what you want. You just protect me, and I'll pay you tribute, but just don't invade me, and don't ruin my life here. And so that's what he did. And then he taxed his own people to pay for that. So basically what this guy here, I think it's important to know who he was. It's Tiglath-Pileser. He in the spring of 745 BCE, he was the governor of Kala. Okay, that's up in the Syrian area, and he seized the Assyrian throne during a rebellion against the weak king. They had a weak king up there in Assyria, and so he assumed the name. His name was Pulu, and so he assumed the name of Tiglath-Pileser, which actually, you think about it, Tiglath-Pileser sounds a whole lot more mean and fierce than Pulu. Okay, so and he quickly reorganized the kingdom by centralizing his power and creating a standing army. Now, as with a lot of the ancient kings and modern kings after him, and presidents and dictators and anybody that's in charge of a country that think they can get by with it, they have thoughts to expanding their empire. And so Tiglath-Pileser the third led, I think I'm just going to call him TP3, led various campaigns subjugating lands, everywhere. I mean, he just went all over it, and the area of Syria and Palestine. And he, in fact, let me show you there while I'm reading all of this other stuff. There's the kingdom, okay? And he ruled from around 745 to 727 BCE, and eventually he merged the kingdoms of Assyria, which up in here, this area, with Babylon down here. Okay, so he conquered all of that. Now, one of the things that we know about the Assyrian armies, they were absolutely, positively the most ruthless bunch of guys that the world had ever seen when it came to warfare. They were so ruthless and so violent in their warfare. They had absolutely no code of ethics or anything like that. And so, really, when they came into a country and invaded it, that they struck fear in everyone's heart because of just how nasty and mean they were. And people were just, they would just give up and hope that they didn't get killed because these guys were just mean and nasty. So it's that was one of the things that they had going for them. They were terribly, terribly just overwhelmingly nasty. They were terrorists. Yeah, they were definitely terrorists, and they terrorized the countries that they invaded. You think today of like back during World War II, when Japan invaded China, and the way that the Imperial Army just went right through China, and you had the rape of Nanking and all of those kind of things. If you're a student of history, but they were ruthless, and so yeah, and even today in Israel, I think one of the parties, one of the political parties, Hamas, is another word for terrorist. And so anyway, going ahead, this guy Tiglath-Pileser had quite a few, significant interactions with the kings of Judah and Israel, and these are recorded in Scripture as well as in Assyrian inscriptions. Now he seems to be involved actively in the politics of Palestine and Syria. Palestine meaning being the area around encompassing all of Israel, Phoenicia, down in the Philistine areas and so forth. Okay, so Palestine, that was not a political statement. All right. In the biblical descriptions, the Assyrian king is called Pul and Tiglath-Pileser, and it's the same in some of the extra biblical inscriptions too, that he's known as Tiglath-Pileser, and is also referred to as Puwal, Puwal, instead of just Pul, and they call him the great king of Assyria. And so there are some of these. See, there's a picture of or a relief of Tiglath-Pileser, and I thought that was kind of cool. I was just wondering what kind of a watch he's wearing here, but this inscription here talks. It's a summary of some of his military exploits. And I'm sure if you looked at it close enough, you'll see right away what that is. And just go ahead and read that at your own leisure. There is a hole there that you'll have to make up stuff, but I'm sure everyone can just probably take a look at that and read right off of it. And when you do, let me know how it comes out. All right. So in 743 BCE, Tiglath-Pileser marched toward the Mediterranean. He went down and he received tribute from a lot of the kings in the area. One of those kings was Menachem, king of Israel. And we've already read that in chapter 15, verse 19. So then King Pul of Assyria invaded the land, and Menachem gave him 1,000 talents of silver to gain his support and strengthen his own hold on the kingdom. Now, in Assyrian inscription, it said Tiglath-Pileser III boast, as for Menachem, I overwhelmed him like a snowstorm, and he fled like a bird alone and bowed at my feet. And so that was typical of the language in those days when, the victor gets to write the history. And so that's the way he had it written about him. And that's generally the way those kind of things went back in those days, that whoever won, he got to say all of these grand and glorious things, and how everybody else just cowered at his feet and so forth. And, there may be some of that. So Menachem of Samaria is also listed as one of the 17 kings of the West from whom Tiglath-Pileser received tribute. Now, what was that tribute? He claims to have received gold, silver, tin, iron, elephant hides, ivory, linen garments with multicolored trimmings, blue dyed wool, purple dyed wool, ebony wood, boxwood, and whatever other precious things, something that a country looked at and said, okay, this is good stuff. This is what we value, and this is what we're putting in our treasury. Well, guess what? That's what he got from those countries, so that you pay me tribute, or we're going to terrorize your country and your people. So after Menachem, years later, and we'll read it in subsequent lessons, Pekah, an Israelite official, assassinated Menachem's son Pekaniah, and Pekahiah, I guess, and succeeded him as king. Now, he teamed up with the king of Syria, a guy named Rezin, and laid siege to Jerusalem. So they left Samaria and up let me get here's a small picture of it. They left up here in this area here, and Aphek and Samaria, and they moved down here toward Jerusalem, and they laid siege to Jerusalem. So here you got the northern tribes, Israel, again attacking, or they find themselves again attacking Israel, or Judah and Israel fighting each other. And so the king of Judah then, remember, this is Syria, and let me get back to, and that would be over here. Let me find my other map here for you. And then my computer. Okay, here we've got these guys here, and over here they're fighting. They're with Israel, and they're fighting Judah. So king of Judah goes up here to this guy up here, the Assyrian Empire, and says, "Hey, if I pay you, can you come down here and let's have a treaty, and we'll fight these guys, and then you can take over their stuff too." And so they had a treaty, and he wanted him to come and rescue him from the king of Syria, which is Damascus. And so that's what happened. And so there's a clay tablet, and let's go back down to what that clay tablet looked like. Let's see, it's this one right here, this clay tablet. It's called the Annals of Tiglath-Pileser, and it was actually discovered in his palace in 1873. And it's not an they say it's not an annal in the sense of a year-by-year description of his reign, but it's kind of a summary statement of his military and building accomplishments. And it lists a group of kings in Syria and Palestine who paid him the tribute that he was talking about, the gold, silver, tin, elephant hides, and all that kind of stuff. And so among the kings listed is Jehoahaz, the Judahite, and this inscription confirms that the tribute that the Bible describes King Ahaz bringing to Tiglath-Pileser, and the biblical inventory only lists what Ahaz gave, or only the most precious items of gold and silver. I mean, there's all sorts of other things too, but it's kind of interesting when you find these clay tablets and things like that that are certainly extra biblical, and then they refer back to things that you see and hear about in the Bible. So again, confirming what is in the Bible. So any comments or questions now on that I've given a little history lesson on that? Comments
yes.
or questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Rabbi. Question. So as far as Tiglath-Pileser, as far as getting contributions from all these different other kings, did he make, I guess, the rest of the other kings of Judea, and did they make them worship them? Did they have to? I mean, I know they paid them contributions for not being attacked. Did they influence their faith?
Their religion? Not to a great extent, because as long as they got their money, most of these guys were not particularly interested in influencing and forcing people to their religion. Because why? Because that you can take people's money away from them, and that's okay. But a lot of times people will if they'll give you your money, but they're pretty particular about their own beliefs and religion, and they would fight you more fiercely for that than they would you would hope anyway. Now I know there's always exceptions, and a lot of people just roll over and play dead, but you only have to look as far as the rebellion against the Israelite rebellion against the Greeks, and the Maccabean rebellion, to see how that it finally came to a tipping point where these people said, no, we're not going any further with this. We're going to fight. If we die, we die, but they're not going to make us become Greek, and they're wanting us to worship them in our own temple. So that's not going to happen.
Yes, sir. So how I guess the difference, what was the, I guess I want to say, Maccabee happened how far from this point in time?
Another 500 years.
And then there was the book of Maccabee.
Yeah, that occurred in 166, 167, somewhere in that time frame, BCE. And this where we're talking about here is around 750, 745, something like that, BCE. So it's about 500 or 600 years difference.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Any other comments or questions before we go on? All right. Okay, so then we'll have when the Tiglath-Pileser III, and the scriptures talk about Hoshea, son of Elah, conspired against Pekah, son of Remaliah. Okay, all these names, my goodness. And he attacked and assassinated him. Then it succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. Now, if the annals of Tiglath-Pileser are to be believed, he was actually behind that assassination, because he says, they overthrew their king, Pekah, and I placed Hoshea as king over them. I received from them 10 talents of gold, 1,000 talents of silver as their tribute, and brought them to Assyria. So eventually, all of Syria, Damascus, that area, was conquered by the Assyrians, and Tiglath-Pileser deported people from the northern half of Israel. And 2 Kings 15:29 talks, in the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and he captured and a whole bunch of cities, Leon, Abel Beth, Makkah, Yanoah, Kadesh, Hatzor, Gilead, Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, the tribe of Naphtali, and he carried the people captive to Assyria. Now, there's another Assyrian inscription that that kind of refers to this, that says that Israel, all its inhabitants and their possessions, I led to Assyria. Now, when they talk about these guys, and there a lot of times with the writings and so forth, they're hyperbole. Okay, they're exaggerated, and so that it's like they said, well, we came in there and we took all the people out. What they meant was that that they took out all the ones with an education, all the ones with the big bank accounts, and all the ones that were the scholars, the engineers, that kind of the people, or perhaps the royalty, or somebody that if they left them there could possibly foment revolt or something against the conqueror. So they would take those people out. It's been estimated that when the Assyrians finally took all of northern, the northern tribes in 722 BCE, that there were only like 5 to 7% of the people were actually taken out of Israel, and though that was all of the highly educated, the wealthy, the royalty, and that type of people. They didn't take the farmers and the the craftsmen, the regular worker bees. They took all of the higher class of the more educated people away from them. So that would, the ones that could be a threat. And so what that means is that the significance of that is, we talk about the lost tribes of Israel, and I don't want to get into that so much tonight as to what happened to the lost tribes of Israel and so forth, other than to say the lost tribes of Israel were never lost. They are not lost. Right? Any comments or questions on that? Okay, well then let's get into, we're going to circle back, and I even hate to say that, we're going to circle back on that, but we are going to now revisit the scriptures that talk about, we're going to talk about Uzziah. All right, now that is in 2 Chronicles 26, and that whole chapter is going to be just about Uzziah. And so it says, then all the people of Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old, and made him king in place of his father Amaziah. He built Elot and restored it to Judah after the king slept with his fathers. Uzziah was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jacholiah from Jerusalem. Okay, Jacholiah. Okay, easy for you to say. All right, so there's a couple of things I wanted to point out here, is that evidently Uzziah came to power. It's a little unknown how that took place, because he was only 16 years old when he was placed on the throne. Well, his father Amaziah had been kind of in exile, and he was down at Lachish and basically hiding out because the people had lost confidence in him. He had given away the national treasury, and so he decided he had to skip town. Well, they went down to there were assassins that went down to Lachish and assassinated him. But this time, though, Uzziah was 16 years old enough for them to install him as the king. And it says all the people decided to make Uzziah the king. So again, a little bit of hyperbole where it says all the people. Well, who are all the people? That's like having a party and everybody was there, that sort of thing. But there was something there, something that is not not terribly it's different than all of the other countries, because somewhere there was some popularity involved in some popular choice of the Jewish people of Judah when they selected Uzziah, because the his brothers and cousins and all of that, a lot of them had already been killed off, and so when it came down to Uzziah, they said, "Yeah, let's take this guy," and that was a good choice, because but he was picked somehow by the people and not totally by hereditary right. Now, and this Eloth, that's they say that's Elat, he built a port down on the head of the Red Sea, and that's the port of Elat today. And so he built that, annexed it, made that part of Israel, or made part of Judah. I mean, he made that part of the possessions of Judah and Jerusalem, and he reigned then for 52 years. The only one that reigned longer was Manasseh. So he did what was right in the eyes of Adonai, just as his father Amaziah had done. And he continued to seek God in the days of Zechariah, who had understanding through the visions of God. Now, this Zechariah that they're talking about here is Zechariah the prophet. So as long as he sought Adonai, God made him prosper. Important statement there, that as long as he started out on the right path. It's, he was young. He was he had evidently some good training, and so he went right to it and was doing everything that he was supposed to in God's eyes. And the Bible says, as long as he trusted God, he prospered, and Judah prospered. And that's kind of a lesson for us today. As long as we trust in God, then we don't really have to worry about a lot of things, because he's got our six. He will take care of us. And yeah, there will be trouble, there will be trials, but you know what? We don't have to be afraid, that because God is on the throne and he's going to be taking care of us. I don't want to re-preach that sermon from yesterday. All right. Because you've already heard it. Now, going ahead, I went and summarized basically the accomplishments of Azzariah, of Uzziah, and these, he went out, he fought the Philistines, breached the wall of Gat, a major city in the Philistine area, the wall of Jabneh, the wall of Ashdod, and he built cities in Ashdod, the surrounding areas. He built Judean cities in these formerly Philistine areas. God helped him against the Philistines, against the Arabs who dwelt in Gur-Baal, which is down in the what we would call today the Egyptians, the Sinai desert area, and against the Meunites, the Ammonites, people from Ammon. They paid tribute to Uzziah, and his fame spread abroad even to the border of Egypt. well, that's not very far, but anyway, that's still pretty good. And he became exceedingly strong. And he built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate, the valley gate, and at the angle, and fortified all of them. He built towers in the wilderness and dug out many cisterns because he had much livestock, and he had farmers in the foothills and the plains and vine dressers in the mountains and in the fertile fields, for he loved the soil. Okay, here's a guy that, even though he was a great king and he liked, obviously he liked the pomp and circumstance of being a king, something inside him, he still had his roots in the dirt, and he liked it. Said he loved the soil, and so I liked the guy already just for that. He liked the soil, and so going ahead, he built a well-trained army ready to go out to battle by divisions, according to the numbers mustered by the hand of Yael, the scribe, and Maaseiah, the official under Hananiah, one of king's chieftains. The total number of family leaders uh, over the fighting men, the total number of officers, basically what he had, was 2,600, and under their command was an army of 307,500 men trained for war, with mighty power to support the king against the enemy. He provided shields, spears, helmets, body armor, bows, and sling stones for the entire army. And in Jerusalem, he made machines designed by skillful men to be used in the towers and on the corners to shoot arrows and hurl stones. So his fame spread far, for he was marvelously helped until he became strong. So God helped him along. He was following what God wanted him to do. And as long as he put his faith and trust in God, God was helping him out. And so he became very strong. Well, along there somewhere, the strength became prideful, and so that was his downfall. Any comments or questions so far on that? And going on to verse 16, said, but when he became strong, his heart grew so haughty that he acted corruptly. Does that sound familiar? I mean, that just seems like throughout history, over and over and over again, all throughout history, these guys, they start out maybe a humble person, and then they get up to the top, and then all of this, they become proud, haughty, corrupt. So this guy was no exception. He trespassed against Adonai, his God, by entering into the temple of Adonai to burn incense upon the altar of incense. Okay, then Azariah the Kohen with 80 valiant Kohanim, priests of Adonai, followed him in. I wish really that they would have had, they would come up with some different names, because how many Azariahs do we have here? Well, the high priest, and now he's a king. I mean, Azariah was a king. Now this guy, same name, different guy, he's a Kohen. And so he led 80 Kohanim priests against the king, and this king is powerful, and he's very popular, and he does what he wants to do. And yet these 80 men, facing certain death, walked in and stood in front of him and said, "Nah, you're not going to do this. You cannot do this." They opposed Uzziah the king, and said to him, "It is not for Uzziah to burn the incense to Adonai, but for the Kohanim, the descendants of Aaron, who have been consecrated to burn incense. Get out of the sanctuary, for you have acted unfaithfully. You will have no honor from Adonai Elohim." Then Uzziah, who had a censer in his hand, ready to burn incense, became angry. And while he was raging at the Kohanim, the priest, Sa'arat, which is leprosy, broke out on his forehead right in front of the Kohanim in the house of Adonai beside the incense altar. Now you can imagine these guys, the horror. They told him he was out of bounds. Get out of here. And they're shouting at the king. And so he then shouts back at them. And while he's raving and having a hissy fit, they look at him, and leprosy starts to break out on his forehead. And these guys would have been just apoplectic, because not only they were leprosy was just one of those things that when you saw it, everybody was in fear and dread of it. And they they looked at him, and they stared at him. They were just looking at him, the Bible says. And on his forehead, he had the leprosy, and it's just growing right across his face. And so at that point, they grabbed him and ran and pulled him out of there, because of what was happening, because a leper was not even allowed on the temple grounds, much less inside the temple itself, in the holy place. That was not the Holy of Holies, but it was in the holy place. And so they grabbed him running. And so by this time, Uzziah had figured it out somehow, that maybe they told him, you got leprosy all over you. And so at that point, he ran out on his own. I mean, he was helping them out. He was leaving there on his own. And so it says, the Bible says that he had leprosy from then until the day of his death. Now, this leprosy, I would say, we talk about leprosy was not always what we call Hansen's disease, that there was a spiritual aspect to leprosy in the Bible. And sometimes people were struck with leprosy as a punishment from God, and it came immediately. And so this was another one of those episodes there that someone was struck with leprosy. That was punishment from God himself. It happened right then and very, very quickly. And so there was no dispute, no doubt whatsoever that this was a punishment from God to Uzziah for overstepping his bounds and deciding that he was going to burn incense, just like the priest would do. And it did not end well for him. And so that was a spiritual affliction that erupted, and it showed itself as leprosy. So then it went on and said he lived in a separate house with Sarat, for he was cut off from the house of Adonai. Jotham, his son, was in charge of the king's house and governed the people of the land. So in this instance, like I already said, he was not to be in the temple grounds at all, and then all of a sudden, here he is in the temple itself, in the holy place. And so these priests, man, they wanted to get him out as soon as possible before lightning struck, and they were all burned up. And so they got him out. He lived in a separate house. Even though he was king, he was still a leper. And so that they had to put him in a separate house. And the way he communicated was through his son. His son Jotham was the go-between, and the intercessor, the intermediary, however you want to call that, the liaison between Uzziah and the world. And in fact, it got to the point where that Jotham, it says, was in charge of the king's house, and he governed the people, not the king. So we go ahead, and I'm just going to read the last two verses of 2nd Chronicles. Now, and the rest of the acts of Uzziah from beginning to end were recorded by the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos. So Uzziah slept with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the field of burial that belonged to the kings, for they said he had Sarat. Then Jotham, his sons, became king in his place. Okay, so they buried him in land that belonged to the kings. Okay, this was royal land, but he was not buried in a tomb with the other kings. He was buried in royal land, but not in the tombs. Okay, so now here's a verse that I want to leave you with tonight, and it's Isaiah 6:1. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw Adonai sitting on a throne high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Now, if you look at the King James Version, of that. There's a word stuck in there. And in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord. So Isaiah is kind of telling us that, guess what? Oh, Uzziah was so popular. He was good, and everybody prospered under him. So he was the guy that they really liked, and so they looked up to him, and so he was their man. And so in a lot of times you'll see that people will put a person up, and they do whatever they want to, whatever they tell them to do, and so forth. And they don't really, maybe they kind of come between that person and what God would really have you do in some cases. And I think this was possibly what Isaiah was trying to say here, that he said, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord. I'd already been looking at Uzziah and what a great king he was, and how prosperous everyone was, and how great Judah was doing under his leadership. Even though he has leprosy, we're still doing really great. And then he died. And so then Isaiah said, okay, now I see not only Uzziah, but I see the Lord, and he is so far greater than anything that Uzziah was. And so I want to just leave you with that. Don't ever let one person, whoever that may be, a pastor, a rabbi, a teacher, or something like that, get to the point that you look to them instead of looking to God. You look to them for their answers instead of looking to the Word. You never want to be in that position of doing that, because people, no matter who they are going to disappoint you